Have you ever thought you knew someone completely, only to discover you didn't know them at all? That question haunted me on a cold Tuesday morning in March, standing in a cemetery I'd visited 100 times before, staring at a man I'd never seen in my life, crying at my daughter's grave. I'm talking about the kind of crying that shakes your whole body, the kind that comes from somewhere so deep inside you that it feels like your soul is breaking apart. This stranger, this janitor in worn-out clothes with dirt under his fingernails, was sobbing over my Emily like he'd lost his own child, and I had no idea why. My name is Richard, and I thought I knew everything about my daughter. I thought I understood her life, her choices, her heart. I was wrong. So devastatingly, completely wrong. What this man told me that morning didn't just shake my world, it shattered it into a million pieces and forced me to rebuild everything I thought I knew about the girl I raised. Let me take you back to that moment, because even now, 6 months later, I can still feel the frost in the air, still smell the fresh flowers I'd brought, still hear the sound of his weeping cutting through the morning silence like a knife. It was 7:30 in the morning, earlier than I usually visited, but I couldn't sleep. I hadn't been sleeping well since Emily died 8 months ago. She was only 24, my beautiful, brilliant daughter, taken from this world by a drunk driver on her way home from work. One moment she was texting me goodnight, the next moment she was gone. Just like that. The police said she didn't suffer, that it was instant, but how could they possibly know? How could anyone know what happens in those final milliseconds when life turns to death? I tormented myself with these questions every single night, lying awake in the darkness of the bedroom Emily used to run into when she was little and had nightmares. Now I was the one with nightmares, and there was nowhere to run. The cemetery was my only solace, the only place where I felt close to her anymore. I'd go there and talk to her, tell her about my day, share the mundane details of a life that felt meaningless without her in it. I'd bring fresh flowers every week, usually roses because they were her favorite, though I'd recently learned she actually preferred wildflowers. How did I not know that? How did I not know something so simple about my own daughter? That morning I parked my car in the usual spot and walked the familiar path toward her grave, my breath creating small clouds in the cold air. The cemetery was deserted, or so I thought. As I rounded the corner near the old oak tree that Emily used to climb as a child when we'd visit my parents' graves, I saw him, a man, maybe in his 50s, kneeling at Emily's headstone. At first I thought maybe he was a groundskeeper, but it was too early for maintenance work, and besides, he wasn't doing any work. He was just kneeling there, his body hunched over, and I could hear it, the crying. Not quiet tears, not gentle weeping, but full, body-racking sobs that echoed in the emptiness of the morning. My first instinct was anger. Who was this person? What right did he have to be at my daughter's grave? This was my space, my sacred place to be with Emily. But as I got closer, something stopped me from immediately confronting him. There was something about his grief that felt genuine, that felt earned. His hands were pressed against the cold marble of her headstone, like he was trying to absorb her presence through the stone, and his shoulders shook with each sob. I stood there for what felt like hours but was probably only a minute or two, just watching this stranger mourn my daughter. He was wearing a janitor's uniform, I could see that now. Navy blue with a name patch that I couldn't quite read from where I stood. His hair was gray and thinning, his hands weathered and worn from years of hard labor. Everything about him screamed working class, ordinary, forgettable. But his grief was anything but ordinary. Finally, I found my voice. "Excuse me," I said, and my words came out harsher than I intended, sharp with confusion and territorial instinct. "Can I ask what you're doing here?" He jumped, clearly startled, and turned to face me. His eyes were red and swollen, tears streaming down his weathered face, and when he saw me, something flickered in his expression. Recognition? Fear? I couldn't tell. He quickly tried to wipe his tears away with the back of his hand, struggling to compose himself. "I'm sorry," he stammered, his voice thick with emotion. "I didn't think anyone would be here this early. I'll go." He started to stand up, but I held up my hand. Something in me needed to know, needed to understand why this man was crying at my daughter's grave like his heart was breaking. "Wait," I said, my voice softer now. "Please, I'm Emily's father, Richard." I watched his face carefully, looking for any sign of recognition, any clue that might explain this bizarre situation. He froze, his eyes widening, and fresh tears spilled down his cheeks. "Mr. Anderson," he whispered. and the way he said my name with such familiarity and such pain sent chills down my spine. I'm Miguel. Miguel Rodriguez. I'm so sorry for your loss. I'm so sorry. His voice cracked on those last words, and he looked like he might collapse. I stepped closer, my heart pounding. How did you know Emily? I asked, and I could hear the desperation in my own voice. How do you know my name? Miguel looked at me for a long moment, and I saw a war playing out behind his eyes, some internal struggle about whether to speak or stay silent. Finally, he took a deep breath, and what he said next began to unravel everything I thought I knew about my daughter's life. She saved my life, Mr. Anderson. Your daughter saved my life, and I never got to thank her. The words hung in the cold morning air between us, and I felt my legs go weak. What did he mean she saved his life? Emily was a graphic designer. She worked at a marketing firm downtown. She spent her days designing logos and websites. How could she have saved anyone's life? I don't understand, I managed to say, my mind racing through every conversation I'd had with Emily in the last few years of her life, searching for any mention of this man, any clue that might make sense of this moment. Miguel's face crumpled, and he covered it with his hands for a moment, trying to collect himself. When he looked at me again, his eyes were filled with such profound sadness and gratitude that it took my breath away. Maybe we should sit, he said quietly, gesturing to the bench near Emily's grave, the one I'd had installed a few months after her death so I could spend longer visits with her. I nodded numbly and followed him to the bench, and as we sat down together, two strangers bound by grief for the same girl, I had no idea that everything I was about to hear would force me to confront the most painful truth a parent can face, that I didn't really know my own child at all. Miguel sat there for a moment, his hands clasped tightly together, knuckles white with tension. He was clearly struggling with where to begin, how to tell me whatever it was he needed to say. I waited, my heart hammering in my chest, my mind spinning with possibilities, none of which came close to the truth. Finally, he spoke. 2 years ago, I was homeless, Mr. Anderson. I'd lost everything, my job, my apartment, my dignity. I was sleeping in the park downtown, the one near the fountain with the bronze statues. Do you know it? I nodded. I knew it. It was the park where Emily used to eat lunch sometimes. She'd mentioned it a few times, said she liked to watch the people there, that it inspired her creativity. I was at my lowest point, Miguel continued, his voice barely above a whisper. I hadn't eaten in 3 days. I was sick, probably pneumonia, coughing so hard I thought my ribs would break. I'd been to the shelter, but they were full. Everyone was full. It was winter, brutally cold, and I remember thinking that maybe this was it. Maybe this was how it would end for me. Freezing to death on a park bench like I didn't matter, like my life had counted for nothing. He paused, and I saw him swallow hard, fighting back more tears. Then she came, this beautiful young woman with kind eyes, carrying her lunch from that fancy sandwich place on 5th Street. She walked right up to me, Mr. Anderson, and you have to understand, people didn't do that. They'd walk past, avoid eye contact, pretend I didn't exist, but not her, not Emily. The way he said her name with such reverence and warmth made my throat tighten. She asked if she could sit with me, actually asked like she was requesting permission to be in my presence. I must have looked at her like she was crazy because she smiled, this beautiful, genuine smile, and said, "You look like you could use some company." She sat down, pulled out her sandwich, broke it in half, and offered me part of it. Just like that. No judgment, no pity, just kindness. Pure, simple kindness. Miguel's voice broke, and he had to stop for a moment. I sat there, frozen, picturing Emily doing exactly what he described. It sounded like her, the girl I thought I knew, the compassionate young woman I'd raised. But there was clearly more to this story. Something bigger than just sharing a sandwich with a homeless man. We talked, Miguel continued. She asked about my life, really asked, like she genuinely wanted to know. I told her about my daughter, about how I'd lost her in a custody battle years ago, how that loss had sent me into a spiral of depression and drinking that cost me everything. Your Emily? She didn't flinch, didn't judge. She just listened. She told me about her work, about her love for design, about you and her mother. At the mention of my ex-wife, I felt a pang of guilt. Jennifer and I had divorced when Emily was 15, and I'd always wondered how much that had hurt her, how much she'd hidden from us to protect our feelings. Emily came back the next day, Miguel said, and the day after that. For 2 weeks, she came to that park every day during her lunch break. She brought me food, She brought me medicine when I was sick. She brought me clean socks and a warm blanket. But more than that, Mr. Anderson, she brought me hope. She talked to me like I was a person, like I mattered. She told me stories about her childhood, about climbing trees with her father, about learning to ride a bike, about her first heartbreak. She shared her life with me, and in doing so, she reminded me that I still had a life worth living. I felt tears streaming down my own face now, silent tears that I didn't bother to wipe away. This was my Emily, the girl with the enormous heart, but it was also a side of Emily I'd never fully seen, never fully appreciated. How many times had I brushed off her concerns about social issues, about homelessness, about inequality? How many times had I told her to focus on her career, to not worry so much about things she couldn't change? She helped me get into a program, Miguel said, his voice stronger now, more steady. There was a rehabilitation center across town that had an opening, but I needed someone to vouch for me, to help with the paperwork, to make sure I showed up to the intake appointment. Emily did all of that. She took a day off work, Mr. Anderson. She drove me there herself, waited with me for 4 hours while they processed my application, and when they accepted me, she hugged me and told me she was proud of me. Proud of me. A homeless drunk she'd met in a park. Can you imagine? I couldn't speak. My throat was too tight, my heart too full of emotions I couldn't even name. Pride in my daughter mixed with shame at my own ignorance. Grief at her loss tangled with amazement at who she'd been. I got clean, Miguel said, and there was a note of triumph in his voice now mixed with the sadness. I got sober. I completed the program, got my certification as a custodial worker, found a job at an office building downtown. I've been working there for 18 months now, Mr. Anderson. I have an apartment. Nothing fancy, just a studio, but it's mine. I've been trying to reconnect with my daughter, taking it slow, but we've had coffee a few times. My life isn't perfect, but it's a life, and I have your Emily to thank for that. She literally saved me when I thought there was nothing left to save. He turned to look at me directly, and the intensity in his eyes made me catch my breath. I came to her funeral, he said softly. I stood in the back because I didn't think I belonged there with all her friends and family, people who really knew her, but I needed to be there, needed to say goodbye, and I've come here every week since then, every Tuesday morning before work to talk to her, to thank her, to tell her about my progress, about my daughter, about the life I'm building because of her kindness. The pieces were starting to fall into place now, but I felt like the ground was shifting beneath me. Every Tuesday? I repeated, my voice hoarse. He nodded. I usually come earlier, around 6:30, to make sure I'm gone before anyone else arrives. I didn't want to intrude on family time, but today I got delayed at work, had to finish a job that ran late, and I thought I'd still have time. He looked down at his hands, wringing them together nervously. I'm sorry if I upset you. I know I don't have any right to be here taking up space at her grave. She was your daughter, your family. I'm nobody. Don't say that, I said sharply, surprising both of us with the force of my words. Don't ever say that. If Emily cared about you enough to do all those things, then you're not nobody. You're someone she chose to help, someone she chose to save, and that makes you part of her story, part of our story now. Miguel looked at me with such raw gratitude that it almost hurt to witness. But there was something else nagging at me, something that didn't quite add up. Miguel, I said slowly, Emily never mentioned you, not once, and I'm trying to understand why. We talked regularly, we were close, or at least I thought we were close. Why would she keep something this significant from me? The question hung in the air between us, and I saw Miguel's expression change, becoming more guarded, more careful. He looked away from me, his gaze settling on Emily's headstone. Mr. Anderson, he said quietly, there's more to the story, things that might be hard for you to hear, but if you want to know why Emily kept this from you, if you want to really understand your daughter, then I need to tell you everything, all of it. Are you sure you want to know? I felt a chill run through me that had nothing to do with the cold morning air. Part of me wanted to say no, wanted to preserve the image of Emily I'd carefully constructed in my mind, the Emily I thought I knew. But a bigger part of me, the part that had been aching for answers since the moment I saw this man crying at her grave, needed to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Tell me, I said. Tell me everything. Miguel took a deep breath, and what he told me next changed everything I thought I knew about my daughter, about myself, and about the fundamental failures of my parenting that I'd been too blind to see. Have you ever had someone hold up a mirror to your soul and forced you to look at the ugliest parts of yourself? That's what the next hour felt like, as Miguel's words peeled back layer after layer of comfortable illusions I'd built around my relationship with Emily. Emily didn't tell you about me because she was afraid of your reaction, Miguel began. His words careful, measured, like he was diffusing a bomb. Not afraid that you'd be angry exactly, but afraid that you wouldn't understand, that you'd lecture her about safety and boundaries and being too trusting. She told me about a time when she was in high school, when she'd befriended a girl from a troubled home and brought her over to your house for dinner. Do you remember that? I did remember. The girl's name was Sarah, and she'd been rough around the edges, clearly from a difficult background. I'd been polite during dinner, but had pulled Emily aside afterward and expressed my concerns about her choice of friends, about how she needed to be careful about who she associated with, especially as she was applying to colleges. Emily had been upset, had accused me of being judgmental, but I'd thought I was being protective. She told me about that night, Miguel said. She said you meant well, but that it taught her that some parts of her life, some of her choices, she needed to keep separate from you because you wouldn't approve, wouldn't understand. She loved you, Mr. Anderson. She talked about you all the time, about how hard you worked to provide for her after the divorce, about how you'd taught her to be strong and independent. But she also felt like you had very specific ideas about how she should live her life, about what was appropriate and safe and acceptable. The words hit me like physical blows, each one landing with painful accuracy. I wanted to protest, to defend myself, to explain that I was just trying to protect her, to keep her safe in a dangerous world. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the way Miguel was looking at me, with compassion rather than judgment, or maybe it was the recognition that deep down, I knew he was right. How many times had I dismissed Emily's passions as impractical? How many times had I pushed her toward financial security and conventional success rather than supporting her wilder dreams? How many conversations had we had where I'd been so busy dispensing advice that I'd forgotten to really listen? Emily had a whole world that she kept separate from you and her mother, Miguel continued, and I could hear the weight of what he was about to reveal in his voice. The homeless advocacy wasn't just about me. After she helped me, she started volunteering at a shelter downtown every Saturday morning. She'd bring art supplies and teach design classes to homeless youth, trying to give them skills that might help them find work. She donated a significant portion of her salary to various charities every month. She was planning to quit her corporate job and start a nonprofit focused on employment programs for the unhoused. She'd already filed the paperwork, had a business plan, had even secured some initial funding. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Emily was planning to quit her job, to start a nonprofit. These were massive, life-changing decisions, and she hadn't told me any of it. She wanted to tell you, Miguel said quickly, seeing the pain on my face. She was waiting for the right time. She knew you'd worry about her financial stability, about her throwing away her career. She wanted to have all her ducks in a row first, to be able to show you that it was viable, that she'd thought it through. She was planning to tell you at Christmas. Christmas, the Christmas that never came, because a drunk driver ran a red light on a rainy November evening and stole her from this world, before she could share her dreams, before she could live the life she was building. There's more, Miguel said, and I wasn't sure how much more my heart could take, but I nodded for him to continue. Emily was dating someone, a man named James who worked at the shelter where she volunteered. They'd been together for almost a year. She was serious about him, Mr. Anderson. Really serious. She'd told me she thought he might be the one, but she hadn't introduced him to you yet because she was worried about what you'd think. What I'd think, I repeated, confusion mixing with my pain. Why would I have a problem with her dating someone? Miguel looked uncomfortable now, shifting on the bench. James is older than her by 15 years. He's divorced with 2 kids, and he doesn't have what you'd call a conventional career. He runs the shelter, works with at-risk youth. Emily was worried you'd see him as unstable, as not good enough for her. She said you'd always had very specific ideas about the kind of man she should end up with, someone with a career in business or law, someone established and conventionally successful. The truth of his words was undeniable. I had made comments over the years, casual remarks about wanting Emily to find someone who could provide for her, who had his life together, who came from a good family. I'd thought I was expressing normal parental concern, but Emily had heard something else. Judgment, narrow-mindedness, a lack of faith in her own judgment. How had I failed so spectacularly at being the father she needed? When had the gap between us grown so wide? And why hadn't I noticed? Mr. Anderson, Miguel said gently, I'm not telling you all this to hurt you or to make you feel guilty. I'm telling you because you asked why Emily kept me a secret, and the truth is she didn't keep just me a secret. She kept this whole beautiful, compassionate, purposeful part of her life separate because she was afraid you wouldn't support it, wouldn't approve. And maybe she was wrong, maybe you would have surprised her, but that fear was real for her, and it shaped how she related to you in her last years. I sat there, tears streaming down my face, my chest tight with grief and regret. I thought about all our conversations, all the times I'd steered the discussion toward her career advancement, her financial planning, her practical future. I'd been so focused on making sure she was secure, so determined to protect her from the mistakes I'd made in my own life, that I'd completely missed the person she was becoming, the beautiful soul she was growing into. I'd loved her. God knows I'd loved her with everything in me, but I hadn't truly seen her. I'd been too busy trying to mold her into my vision of what her life should be to appreciate the vision she had for herself. Does James know about me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Miguel nodded. He came to the funeral too. He was the tall guy with the dark hair who left white roses on her casket. He's been destroyed by her death, Mr. Anderson. He wanted to reach out to you, to connect with you over your shared grief, but Emily had never introduced you, and he didn't feel like he had the right. He didn't want to intrude on your family's mourning. White roses. I remembered them now. Remembered thinking at the time that it was odd that Emily preferred pink roses, but apparently she didn't. Apparently I didn't even know her favorite flower. How many other small details had I gotten wrong? How many times had I confidently stated facts about my daughter that were actually just assumptions, projections of who I wanted her to be rather than observations of who she actually was? I'd like to meet him, I said suddenly. James, I'd like to meet him if he's willing, and I want to know more about Emily's nonprofit plans. I want to understand this part of her life that I missed. It's too late to support her in life, but maybe I can honor her memory by supporting the work she wanted to do. Miguel's face brightened with surprise and hope. Really? You mean that? I nodded, feeling a sense of purpose beginning to bloom through my grief. Emily saved your life, Miguel. She was building something beautiful, something meaningful. The least I can do is try to help finish what she started. We sat there together for a while longer, two men who loved the same extraordinary young woman, sharing stories and tears in the cold morning air. Miguel told me about Emily's sense of humor, about how she'd once shown up at the park with an entire birthday cake because she'd found out it was his birthday, and he had nowhere to celebrate. He told me about her dreams, about how she'd wanted to expand her nonprofit nationally one day, to create a model that other cities could replicate. He told me about her kindness, her patience, her unwavering belief that every person deserved dignity and a second chance. With every story, I felt like I was meeting my daughter for the first time, seeing her through the eyes of someone she'd let into her authentic life, the life she'd been too afraid to share with me. The pain of that realization was almost unbearable, but it was also transforming. I'd spent 8 months grieving the daughter I thought I'd lost, but now I was grieving the daughter I'd never fully known, the relationship we'd never fully had, and the failure of my own making that had created that distance. But mixed with that grief was something else, something that felt almost like gratitude. Gratitude that Emily had found people who saw her truly, who supported her dreams, who celebrated the fullness of who she was. Gratitude that her life had meaning and purpose and impact beyond what I'd ever imagined. Gratitude that through Miguel, I was being given a second chance to know my daughter, even if only through the memories and stories of others. As the sun rose higher in the sky and the cemetery began to fill with other mourners, Miguel stood to leave. He had to get to work, he explained, but he gave me his phone number and James's contact information, and he promised to stay in touch. Before he left, he placed his weathered hand on Emily's headstone one more time, whispering something I couldn't quite hear. Then he turned to me, and there were fresh tears in his eyes. "Thank you for listening, Mr. Anderson," he said. "Thank you for not being angry that I was here. Emily would be happy that we met, that we talked. She always hoped that someday you'd understand, that you'd see this side of her work." After Miguel left, I stayed at Emily's grave for hours, talking to her in a way I never had when she was alive. I apologized for my blindness, for my judgments, for all the ways I'd failed to truly see her. I told her I was proud of her, Not for the corporate job or the financial success, but for the compassion and courage she'd shown in building a life of meaning and purpose. I promised her that I would carry forward her work, that I would make sure her dreams didn't die with her. The weeks that followed that encounter were some of the most transformative of my life. I met with James, and despite my initial discomfort, I quickly understood why Emily had loved him. He was genuine, passionate about his work, and absolutely devastated by her loss. Together, we started working through Emily's nonprofit plans, and with James's expertise and my business background and resources, we began to build what Emily had envisioned. I reached out to the shelter where Emily had volunteered and started teaching a monthly workshop on financial literacy for the residents. I was terrible at it at first, too stiff and formal, but over time I learned to connect with people, to see them as individuals rather than statistics or problems to be solved. I met young people whose stories broke my heart and inspired me in equal measure. I met people like Miguel who just needed someone to believe in them, to give them a chance to see their humanity. I started to understand what Emily had seen, why she'd been so passionate about this work. I went through Emily's apartment, really went through it for the first time, and found journals and notebooks filled with her thoughts, her plans, her beautiful, ambitious dreams for changing the world. I found photographs of her at the shelter, surrounded by smiling faces, her own face radiant with joy and purpose. I found letters from people she'd helped, thanking her for her kindness, for seeing them when the world had made them invisible. I found a half-written letter to me dated 2 weeks before her death, where she was trying to find the words to tell me about her nonprofit, about James, about the life she was building. She'd written, "I hope he'll understand. I hope he'll be proud of who I'm becoming, not just who he wants me to be." Reading those words shattered me in a way that even her death hadn't managed to do, but they also healed something in me, gave me a roadmap for how to honor her memory, how to become the father she'd needed me to be, even if I could only do it in her absence. 6 months after that morning in the cemetery, I stood in a small community center downtown at the official launch of the Emily Anderson Foundation. The room was packed with people whose lives Emily had touched, people I'd never met but who knew my daughter in ways I was only beginning to understand. Miguel was there, looking proud in a new suit, his daughter by his side. James was there, helping to coordinate the event, his eyes still carrying the shadow of loss but also a spark of hope for the work we were building together. Representatives from the city were there, homeless advocates, former shelter residents who were now employed and housed, all gathered to celebrate Emily's vision and commit to making it a reality. As I stood at the podium to speak, I looked out at all those faces and felt Emily's presence so strongly it took my breath away. "My daughter Emily was an extraordinary person," I began, my voice shaking with emotion. But for too long I didn't fully appreciate just how extraordinary she was. I was so focused on conventional measures of success that I missed the real success she was building, the lives she was changing, the love she was spreading into the world. She saved lives, not through grand gestures, but through daily acts of kindness, through seeing people when others looked away, through believing in second chances and human dignity. I told the crowd about Miguel, about that morning at the cemetery, about how a janitor's tears had opened my eyes to the daughter I'd failed to truly know. I talked about Emily's dreams, her plans, her unwavering commitment to making the world better. I announced our first major initiative, a job training and placement program for homeless individuals, combining practical skills with social support, exactly as Emily had envisioned. When I finished speaking, the applause was thunderous, but all I could think about was Emily, about how proud she would be, how happy she would be to see all these people coming together in her name. After the formal program ended, people came up to share their stories with me, their memories of Emily, their gratitude for what she'd done for them. Each story was another piece of the puzzle, another glimpse into the full, beautiful picture of who my daughter had been. A young woman told me how Emily had helped her escape an abusive relationship and get into college. A teenage boy told me how Emily's art classes at the shelter had given him hope when he had none. An older man told me how Emily had helped him reconnect with his estranged son. Story after story, life after life, touched and changed by my daughter's compassion. As the evening wound down and people began to leave, I found myself back at the cemetery, at Emily's grave with Miguel and James beside me. The three of us stood there in comfortable silence, 3 men bound together by our love for an extraordinary woman, by our shared grief and our shared commitment to honoring her legacy. She'd be happy about today, James said softly. She'd be so proud of what you're building, Richard. I'd asked him to call me Richard, not Mr. Anderson. We were family now, bound by Emily's love and by the work we were doing in her name. I hope so, I said. I hope she knows that I finally understand, that I finally see her for who she really was. Miguel placed his hand on my shoulder, a gesture of comfort and solidarity. She knows, he said with quiet certainty. Wherever she is, she knows. So let me ask you something, because I think about this every single day now. How well do you really know the people you love? Do you see them for who they truly are? Or do you see them through the lens of who you want them to be? Are you listening when they speak, really listening? Or are you just waiting for your turn to give advice, to shape them, to mold them into your vision of what their life should look like? I failed Emily in that regard. I loved her fiercely, but I didn't see her fully. I was so busy being the father I thought she needed that I forgot to just be present with who she actually was. It took a janitor crying at her grave to open my eyes, to shatter my comfortable illusions and force me to confront my own failures. But here's the thing I've learned. It's never too late to honor someone's true self, even after they're gone. It's never too late to carry forward their dreams, to support their vision, to let their authentic life inspire your own transformation. The Emily Anderson Foundation is thriving now. We've helped place over 50 people in stable employment. We've housed 30 families. We've provided job training to hundreds. We've created partnerships with businesses across the city willing to give people second chances. Every life we touch, every person we help, is a continuation of Emily's work, a rippling out of the love and compassion she put into the world during her too short life. Miguel comes to every board meeting. He's become an advocate himself, speaking to groups about his journey from homelessness to stability, about the power of one person's kindness to change a life's trajectory. His relationship with his daughter continues to heal and grow. He tells me often that Emily didn't just save his life that day in the park. She gave him back his humanity, his hope, his belief that he mattered. James and I have become close friends. We have dinner once a week and talk about Emily, about the foundation, about life and loss and how to keep moving forward when your heart is broken. He's taught me so much about seeing people's dignity, about meeting them where they are, rather than where I think they should be. He's helped me understand what Emily saw in this work, why it mattered so much to her. I think about that morning in the cemetery all the time, about how close I came to just confronting Miguel and sending him away, protecting my territorial grief, maintaining my ignorance about Emily's secret life. What if I'd done that? What if I'd never heard his story, never learned the truth about my daughter? I would have continued grieving someone who only partially existed, continued living with a false sense of having known her, continued in my blindness. Instead, that encounter broke me open in the most necessary way, forced me to face uncomfortable truths about myself as a father, as a person. It hurt more than I can express, but it also healed something deep inside me, filled a void I didn't even know was there. Now I know Emily, really know her, and I'm so incredibly proud of who she was. Not proud of her salary or her job title or her accomplishments by conventional measures, though those were fine too. I'm proud of her enormous heart, her courage to live according to her values, her commitment to making a real difference in people's lives. I'm proud that she saved Miguel, that she touched so many lives, that she left this world better than she found it. That's a legacy worth celebrating, worth continuing, worth dedicating my own life to honoring. Have you ever been through something that completely changed how you see the world, how you see yourself? Share your story in the comments below. I'd love to hear about the moments that transformed you, the encounters that opened your eyes, the losses that paradoxically helped you gain clarity. Understanding content like this, really taking it to heart, and letting it challenge your assumptions, can profoundly impact how you show up for the people you love. It can help you avoid the mistakes I made, the regrets I carry. If this story touched you, if it made you think differently about truly seeing and supporting the people in your life, please leave a like. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories that explore the complexity of human relationships, the power of compassion, and the transformations that come from our most painful moments, please subscribe to Through My Eyes and hit that notification bell. This channel is dedicated to sharing real, honest, emotional stories that remind us of our shared humanity, that challenge us to be better, to love more fully, to see more clearly. Thank you for being here with me today. for listening to my story about Emily, about Miguel, about learning to truly see your children not as extensions of yourself, but as the unique, extraordinary individuals they are. Thank you for your time, your attention, and your open hearts. Emily's story doesn't end with her death. It continues through the foundation, through the lives we touch in her name, through the lessons her life taught all of us about what really matters. Let's all commit to seeing each other more clearly, loving each other more fully, and building the kind of world Emily believed was possible, one act of kindness at a time.